So I have 3 different Angry Birds here that I've drawn. This one is the first bird that I drew. This was the sad bird. Okay, and you can see he looks pretty sad. And then I drew the shabby bird, and then I drew the ninja bird. Okay, so each one of these, you kind of pick up certain things and like, oh, I should add this next time, or I should try this, or I should try that. So every time you're going to get better and better and better at drawing your Angry Bird. So I'm going to go over some techniques of how to do that. So Angry Bird. This will just be a generic Angry Bird. I'm going to make this for video. I'm going to make this for HD 1080. I'm going to make sure my advanced tab is set to off. Another important thing to make note of is our color mode. If this is set to CMYK, we can't bring this into After Effects. It won't let us. So we have to make sure it's RGB. Now, it's not a huge deal because we can always change that later if it turns out we clicked the wrong thing, but it's a good habit to get into to set that up. All right, so here we are again with a blank canvas. So my first step in this is just kind of defining the shape of them. So all of our Angry Birds are going to be rounded. That way our squashing and everything else kind of makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to go to my shapes here, and I'm just going to draw out my Angry Bird. Okay, so I'm holding down Alt to draw it from the center. I'm holding down Shift to pull it out from the middle, or to keep it even. There we go. So there's my first circle. Okay, now this is going to be the overall shape of my Angry Bird. So I like to save this shape just so I don't have to remake this circle, because I'm going to use that exact shape several times. So I'm going to pull up my layers here, and I like to have these kind of floating right there. There we go. And I'm also going to pull my colors out. And we'll just set that inside here. Why aren't you up there too? Good. Okay. So I'm going to take this layer and I'm just going to duplicate it by dragging it down, and then I have an extra copy. Okay. So I just keep the extra copy in case I need that exact circle. So then once I have this, I can go through and start to decide, you know, what should his features look like. So I'm going to draw out some eyes. So I'm going to go to my ellipse tool again, and I'll just draw out an eye. Okay. Now the eye doesn't have to be a perfect circle. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. It just has to be kind of like an eye shape. If you look at the eyes that I have here, these ones are perfect circles, and they're kind of stacked behind one another so that we get more of a 3D look to them. Whereas this one, they're a little bit more spaced apart, and they're not perfect circles. They actually have some deformation happening to it just to give him more of like a droopy-eyed look. And then my ninja bird, he has just basically like the whites of his eyes right here because he's kind of angry. All right, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to create a circle in the middle. A couple hotkeys to pay attention to is that when we are drawing something like a pupil, which should be perfectly round, you do want to make sure that it is round. So I hold Shift. If you decide you want to move something as you're going, you can hold the space bar and you can move it without letting go. And then you can let go of the space bar and then continue drawing where you want that to be. All right, so there's going to be the iris, which is going to be the colored part. So I have something in there, I'm just going to give it a color. And at first, I'm not too particular about colors. All I want to do is drop a color in there, and later I'll come back and tweak all my colors so they blend nicely together. I'll take the stroke off of that as well. Okay. Then I can take this and I'm going to paste it right in front, like that. And then I'm going to hold Alt and Shift and then drag it down. And then this will be the pupil, which would be black, and there we go. Now, depending on how cute you want your guy to be, obviously the bigger pupils, more of like sad puppy dog kind of thing. You'll see in the sad bird, he has some pretty big pupils. Ninja bird, his pupils seem like they're pretty tiny. And then shabby, his are also pretty big. Okay, so if you wanted to, you can shrink your pupils down really tiny, and it gives them kind of like a beady-eyed look, or make them bigger. Okay, so I'm just going to go with like something like that. Now, in addition to what I've done here, some stuff that adds a little bit of extra detail to this is having some highlights in there. I want this blue to just be a little bit darker, maybe for now. Sure. Then I'm going to go into my rectangle shape, and I'm just going to make a rectangle. And then I'm going to grab, the points in the rectangle, and I'm going to go to this tool, which is the Show Transform, so I can just hit E, and then I can scale this down. And I hold Alt, so it brings it right from this towards the center. Come on. There we go. And so when I do that, you'll see that now I get this kind of pointy shape that I could then shrink down or scale up or adjust or whatever. So I'm not doing anything crazy as far as like illustration wise. I'm just kind of putting in some very basic shapes. And some of you may draw your Angry Birds and they may look 10 times better than this, and that's wonderful. But some of you may have forgotten what Illustrator was and may not like that. I want this to be spun around. There we go. All right, so there's that, and then I'll add another one on this side, spinning it around, and then shrinking it down a bit. So I'm using basically the move tools and the pivoting tools, or the transform tool, to get that in position. All right, and I always jump back because you want to see what is it going to look like to the person. Sometimes you'll put in something you spend a half hour, 15 minutes on, you zoom out and you can't even see it. This bird is pretty big right now on the screen. When he's in our scene, he's going to be smaller. So any detail we have to keep in mind that it's going to be probably like that even. And just those little highlights in there, even though I didn't spend a whole lot of time on them, look a lot better there than they would if I'm really zoomed up on this. It doesn't really look like a highlight at this point, okay? So we have to be aware of this thing at all levels. So there's his eye. Now our stuff here, that's pretty much what I want the eyeball stuff to look like. So I'm just going to group it with Control G. Okay, so now everything is grouped together, so if I were to click and drag, it moves it. Our Angry Bird is going to be moving in a couple directions. If you drew yours in a 3/4 position, he's going to be moving like left to right. Okay? If you drew him in a head-on position, he'll be going like forward and bouncing like that. So depending on where he's bouncing, we want to make sure his eyes are facing in that direction. So this eye should be facing in the correct direction. It should be facing that way. Okay? Now you'll see that I'm getting a little bit of overlap here. I'll show you how we can cut that off in a little bit. So I'm going to take these and just kind of position it. And I'm going to see if I even need to cut it off. I might be able to get by with it just being like right there. And if I duplicated this whole mess and scooted it over, and I'm just holding down Alt to scoot everything over, there it is. Now this eye is on top of the other eye, so I just want to move the layers behind it. So I go to Object, I go to Arrange, and I go to Send Backward, not Send to Back, Send Backward. And the hotkey is just Control and brackets. There we go. So now he has two eyes, and from there it does look like he is looking off to the left, right? It doesn't look like he's looking at us so much as off to the left. I do probably want to shrink this eye down some just because it is just a tad bit further away. So that looks pretty good. All right. So now I can add some other details like eyebrows or lines under his eye. I do have a tablet that I'm using too because a tablet makes it really easy to draw some nice lines. So something like that, but not like that. Maybe like that, that's good. And then maybe like that. Okay, perfect. All right, so now I drew some lines there. Now, what we're getting into so far is all these lines are pretty boring. Everywhere we have a line, it's like perfectly round or perfectly even all the way around. And that doesn't really give us a really good sense of depth because we wouldn't have that. We should have some sort of weighting happening to the line. So on each one of these paths up here, I'm going to change this to a basic stroke. Once I change it to a basic stroke, I can come over here to the Width tool. And on the Width tool, I can actually grab the center of it and, come on, I didn't click the Width tool, there we go. And then I could grab the Width tool and stretch it out. So you'll see now how I'm kind of elongating part of that, so I'm kind of accenting it a little bit. Then I'm going to grab this one, come on. I'm going to switch this to a basic, I'm going to switch back to the Width tool, and then I'll stretch the center of this one out. Okay. Now if I decide that's still maybe too thick, I can always grab these and just change the stroke width over here. So maybe to 3, and then I still get the accent without having, too thick of a stroke. on these eyes too, I'm going to go to my stroke, make sure it's basic, go to my width tool, and on this side I'm going to add a little bit more shadow. Okay, so by doing that, it just adds a little bit more depth to it. On this eye too, I can do the same exact thing. I'll just grab it and pull it up. Come on, there we go. So it just adds a little bit more depth to the eye, making it a little bit more interesting. Now what I don't want to have is I don't like these lines here. I don't like how the lines go through the eyeballs. What I want to do is just chop the eyes at that bottom spot. So once I'm happy with this, and once I'm happy with this, I'm going to grab I'm going to grab these and these, and I'm going to go to Object. I'm going to say Expand Appearance. So all that means is whatever you look like now, I want to lock it in. Okay, so basically it makes shapes out of everything I've done. Once I do that, I can come over here to the Shape Builder. And with the Shape Builder, I can start to isolate certain elements. I can click on this, click on this, click on this, click on that. That should be good. Okay, so now once I've clicked on it, let me hide this other guy. I'm just going to make a new layer, put him on the other new layer, and then I'm just going to move it down and then lock it. There we go. Once I've done that, I should be able to grab this. Now sometimes it takes like an extra click or two to do that. Let me try it again. Let's go to the Shape Builder. I'm isolating this element here. There we go. And I'm isolating that element. I may have to zoom in. But what it's doing is it's allowing me to separate all these pieces. There we go. So now I can delete that, and now I can delete that. And then I get this look of the eyeball actually being like nested inside there. So I'll click these two again. I'm going to go to the Shape Builder. I'm going to say isolate this and isolate this. And that's why I probably didn't do it, because I didn't have both of these clicked. And then I click off, and then I can click on these. Come on. I'm going to ungroup it. Maybe it's grouped and it just doesn't like that. Yep, that was it. Perfect. Okay, so now it looks like his eyes are nested, again giving it more of the look that he's looking off to the side. I could do the exact same thing with this eyeball if I wanted to, just to make it a little bit more apparent that his eye is actually looking forward. So then I'm going to draw in a beak. And again, you could use the pen tool, you can use other tools. I'm just showing you my method for working. So for the beak, because he's generic, I'm just going to draw kind of this generic looking beak shape. Okay, and I'm just using the brush in this case. And then once I have this brush selected, then I can kind of move things into position. There we go. And then I'll hit Control J to join those together, or I can go to Object, Path, and go to Join. So I just drew it out like the shape I want, and then I can just use the Join command to join these together, and then I can use my pen tool to help clean it up. Okay, so your pen tool that they said you use over and over again, this is where you would use it over and over again. And if I want to get rid of a point, I'll get rid of a point and just pull that out. There we go. All right, so that looks pretty neat. Okay, so that's a pretty good shape of a beak. I want to add a little bit more division to this, or a little bit more design. So I'm just going to turn the outline off for that for now. And I'm going to give this a flat color. There we go, just so we can see it. And I'm going to take this, I'm just going to hold Alt and just copy it. Okay, and this is going to be basically like the shadow of the beak, just so we have some dimension to the beak itself. So I grab both of these, I jump back to my Shape Builder, and then I can click on these individual pieces. So I click on each one, that separates it. Then I can just delete that piece, and then give this piece a different color. So I'm just going to go to my colors. Maybe I'll lighten that a little bit. And now it looks like I have some differentiation between those two pieces. And then just to add a little bit more fanciness to it, if I go and duplicate this piece, and then I paste it in front, actually we don't need it, I'm just going to draw it. Where's my pen tool? There we go. So I'm just going to draw a shape in here just so I can have a line that would go along where this division is. There we go. All right, so now I have an edge right there. Right there. Right there. And I'm going to take the fill off and I'm going to make it just a stroke. All right, so there's my stroke. And then I can go through and just tweak what that shape looks like. Because obviously it's not lined up. It needs to be pretty much lined up with this. Whoa, wrong one. There we go. And here's this point. And I picked the horrible color to have the handles on. Pull that down to about there. There we go. Okay. So now that looks like a pretty decent line, but just like the other ones, I want to give it a little bit of character to the line. So I'm going to give it a little bit of thickness first so I can see it. And then I'm going to use the width tool on it. So I go to the width tool and I'll just bulk it up back there. There we go. Now if I don't want these little pointy parts here, what I can do is change, where's my stroke at? Right there. Stroke I'll put inside of this. I don't need you guys. Okay, so on your stroke you actually have options in the stroke palette for what the ends look like. So if I wanted it rounded or I wanted it square, that goes past it or whatever. Okay, so rounded seems to be okay. Again, we're not going to be seeing it from here. We're going to be back there on this. Okay, so we're not going to see it too close to even see that it's protruding past there. Now I may want to come to the stroke some more and maybe just make this a little bit bigger here. There we go. Okay, and then I can take that stroke and just shrink it down altogether. So it's at 12, so I'll make it 6 maybe? 5? Yeah, 5 seems good. Okay, so now that I have his eyes, I have this. Maybe some eyebrows would be a nice touch to him. For this one, I can use a different tool. I'm going to use the, under the paintbrush, there's a Blob Brush. There we go. And the Blob Brush is pretty neat because it allows you to, where are you at? Allows you to paint, and then it's like, there's my shape. Okay? Where it's different than the paintbrush, because the paintbrush is just doing strokes, this is actually making a shape. So with the Blob Brush, I can just make my brush bigger, just like we would in Photoshop, and then draw in some eyebrows. And because it's cartoony, it's fine for them to be kind of hanging off of there. And we'll click there, we'll rotate it a smidge. You can see how quickly I created those. If I tried to draw that path, it might be a little bit trickier to do. There we go. Okay, maybe also some eyelids might help. So I'm just going to copy these and I'm going to paste them in place. And we'll see if this works. I'm going to grab the Blob Brush. Blob Brush. Oops. That's why. Because I was on the fill. No? Let me just pick my black color. Oh, because those still have a fill on them. That's right. I'm going to do those a different way. There we go. Alright, so for the eyelids, I'm just going to draw in some eyelids. There we go. That's the easiest way to do that. Alright. And then just for fun, just give it a color for now. Good. That way I can adjust where this stuff is at. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is set it below the stroke here. So I just go to Object, Arrange, Send Backward. There we go. So now it's like underneath the stroke, so that works good. All right, so then I can take this and I can scoot it over to that one. And then do the same thing, just keep moving it down until it's behind it. Oops. Too far? There we go. All right, that's good. All right, so now back to my layers that I have here. All right, so this one here is going to be the color of the bird, so now I can go pick a color. I've kind of chosen a blue scheme with the bird, so I'm going to eyedrop one of these blues and then just try to find a good color that'll go with it. Take the hue over to that side a little bit more. Nope. I think we're better in this range. All right, that'll be good enough for now. Okay, so then I can come through. I'm going to grab my width tool here, and I'm just going to add some width to that. Okay, now here's what's neat too, is if I added that in the wrong spot, I can always just rotate, because it's a perfect circle, this to the correct spot, or not. There it goes. Just taking its time to update. There we go, so that looks better. And then I'm going to add, here's my other circle right here. I'm going to take that other circle that I had, and I'm just going to create just a little line in the bottom. Like if you look at an Angry Bird, spell it right, and you get Angry Bird. They have this little like circle on the bottom, typically. So I'm going to add that inside there too. So I'm going to go to both of these. What I want to do is I don't want to ruin the stroke. I want that stroke that's on here to be on there forever. So I'm just going to take this bird and copy him, go to my other layer and paste him in there. So I have two, and just so I don't get confused, I'll turn this one off, and I'll turn that stuff off too. There we go. And then I'm just going to set this stroke back to a uniform stroke. I'll set it to that, sure. And then I'm just going to line this up for where I want that circle to be. Jump back to my shape builder, and then I can just isolate these different areas. I don't need that. I don't need that. Hey, just got rid of my shape. Let's try that again. Grab both of these, back to the shape builder. I want that. Let's try this again. It doesn't want to cut it this time. Not use my pen, let me use my mouse. And I'll even pick a different color just to verify that it's going to pick a different color. There it goes. I don't know why it was acting strange, whatever. Okay. So now I have this little wedge here that placed on top of there looks pretty neat. And all I have to do now is move this onto the same layer. So I'll just drop it down into that layer. And then I just need to do the control left bracket. That's not that. Control left bracket until it's sitting behind it. Now there is an issue, you see, that I can't move it behind the stroke because the stroke and the shape are the same layer. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to have one of these that has no fill on it. No fill. There we go. So I have one with no fill, I have one with a fill, and I have that guy sitting there nestled underneath. Cool. There's that. I'm going to add some hair on top of him. So I go to my layer right there. I'm just going to make a new layer now just so it's separated. I'll go back to my blob brush, and then I can just draw out some shapes. Oops, too small. There we go. No, it's too thick, that's the problem. Let's go shorter. So what's nice about having the tablet and the undo button is that you can undo, play around with it. There we go. So that's working. Okay. So now I can take this shape, and using my blob brush I can just fill in these other areas. Now why I keep shrinking to such a small size? And obviously I could have drawn that with the pen tool also, but I just want to show you these different tools. There we go. Alright, so let's say that's our hairstyle. I don't want it completely black. I don't want it right here, so I can still move it. I can still swap my coloring. I can give his color more of like this blue from that. And I can probably pull in some of these points here just to give his hair a little bit more definition. Maybe eliminate some of these points here. There we go. And a couple extra points just hanging out in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to take this and just move it behind his body. So there's that. And then I can adjust its position. If I needed to, I can move points. I can still use the width tool on this. So if I go to the width tool and I start to control where this is happening, I can get some really interesting looks. If it goes too far, like right now this is going from this corner to that corner, I can always stop it. I can say, hey, I don't want you to be as wide. So I add another, basically like keyframe right here. And then add a little bit more thickness in this spot. Go, and then shrink it down over here. Maybe make it a little bit thicker there. That's good. Alright, so I can go all over the place and do that kind of stuff to him, okay, just to give him a little more shape. It's the same way I created these. You can see with this one though, I have this hair is actually on top. So if I take this and move it on top of the circle, and then I take the stroke that's on here and I basically just eliminate that. So I think I have this on the same layer, there it is, and then I have it behind. Now it's in front of it. But I eliminated that stroke by going to expand, yes, and then I just went through and deleted all the extra points that are there. Oops. Okay, so that's another way that you can get rid of that, by eliminating some of this inside there, which is a fine way to do it. I also added on this one here, I added these extra lines. So I went through and painted in some extra lines just at the edges of this, just to give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more distinction, that there is some sort of depth inside the hair. And I believe I used the pen tool on this one. Maybe I didn't, maybe I just drew this out with my brush. Okay, so there's lots of different things that you can do. There's a little tail on this one, created the very same way. This little headband here, I tried to fit the contour of the character. You can see all of these have pretty much the same setup. There's an outline around this beak, so maybe this beak could use an outline going around it. Stroke, black. That's not black. There it is. Oops. Somehow we got a little poking out eyeball here. I have to figure out where that's coming from. I'm not sure where that's hopping in. There we go. Just cover it up. All right, so for now I'm just going to stick this behind his head. Oops, further. There we go. Just so we have that. Now as you do this, what we want to keep in mind is that right now everything is just on one layer, or it's on a couple layers. We haven't thought about layering, and that's fine. Eventually we'll get to the layering process where we're going to start to break this down into how we want to animate it. Okay, so your first step is to take your top 3 Angry Birds that you have now and draw just the Angry Birds. You don't need to draw the backgrounds. You just need to draw the Angry Birds. And then put in as much detail as you want or as is as necessary on them, just to make them look the way that you envision them looking. Yes, sir?
Are we drawing like the background stuff in Illustrator?
You will draw the backgrounds in Illustrator also, but we're not at that stage yet. Okay, because what we're going to do is after we have these 3 drawn, we're going to pick the top 1, and then we'll draw just the background for that one. But we have other stuff we have to keep in mind before we get to that point. Okay? All right, so once you're done with your title flipping, then you can start drawing on this, or if you're at home and you want to just start drawing it, start drawing it. Okay? Any questions on it? No? Make sure you save your stuff. Give them names: Ninja Bird, Sad Bird, Shabby Bird, Generic Bird. All right.